Hello, so tonight we're talking about Batman Knightfall, which is a Batman storyline that ran in 1993. This storyline is best known as being the place wherein Bane breaks Batman's back. Try saying that 3 times fast. Bane breaks Batman's back. Bane breaks Batman. Bane makes break, but or maybe don't, I guess. But basically, that's what this story is. It is where Bane comes to Gotham for the first time, and then he decides to break the bat, and so he literally just breaks Batman's back. And so if you've seen The Dark Knight Rises where Tom Hardy breaks Batman's back, that's where it comes from. And in fact, there are a lot of things in that movie that just come directly from this comic, only the comic does it better. And prior to reading this comic, I never gave a crap about Bane, honestly, because he's always just seemed like some roided up luchador, right? He's always seemed to me like a really strong guy, and Batman has a dozen other strong guys he can fight. But I think this comic made me appreciate Bane as a villain a lot more. And more than that, there are some ideas in here that I think are worth returning to in the modern day and age. And so with this video, I just want to talk about the Knightfall comic. I don't really have a thesis or anything. This isn't going to be some kind of comprehensive overview of the comic. It's not going to be some detailed video essay or review, but rather I just wanted to talk about some ideas I found interesting. And so a quick rundown of the history. Like I said, this came out in 1993. There was a really famous storyline in comics that came out the year prior to this, The Death of Superman. The Death of Superman was a really big storyline. It was a huge popular comic. It was a massive hit. And the reason why is because it's kind of crazy to think that DC would just kill off Superman and he would never be seen again, you know, and it is crazy, because that's not what happened. But nevertheless, everyone was like, why are you killing off an American icon? And so Superman died in the comics, and you had several other Supermen appear to try to replace him, and that's essentially kind of the breakdown of Knightfall. The Death of Superman jacked up sales for that book. It brought a ton of media attention to DC. People who didn't even read comics were picking up The Death of Superman. And so I'm like 90% sure that the Batman editors just looked at that Superman comic and were like, we can do this. And so they decided to write Knightfall, which is a crossover event between several different Batman titles that were coming out at the time. And so each issue is written by a different writer and has different art by a different artist, but it actually is quite cohesive. And that's one of the most impressive things about this book, I think, is the fact that even though it was made by a bunch of different chefs, there weren't too many in the kitchen, so to speak, it still reads like a cohesive story. And so as I said, this is the storyline wherein Bane shows up and he breaks Batman's back. And that's not a spoiler, it's literally on the front cover. The front cover of any collected version just has that crazy Kelly Jones cover where it just shows a Bane that's 4 times the size of Batman breaking Batman's back. And so even though this is considered one of the major Batman storylines, I just never read it because I didn't expect it to be any good, honestly. It's a comic that came out in the early 90s, and more than that, it is a mainstream comic that came out in the early 90s. And there are a lot of really incredible titles that came out in the 90s, but for the most part, the ones I can think of were kind of off the beaten path, or they were indie comics. No one really looks back on the 90s as being a great time for Spider-Man, because that's when you had the Clone Saga. No one really looks back on the 90s as being a great time for Green Lantern, because they kill him off, because it's the same thing as with the Death of Superman. And basically, the Death of Superman just triggered a bunch of different events in comics wherein they were like, oh, let's replace or get rid of or kill off our heroes. And so Knightfall is not unique in that sense. And so the overall plotline of the Knightfall saga, as I understand it, is very simple, which is just that Batman gets his back broken by Bane, and then you have Azrael, who comes over and takes over as Batman, and then the third part is just Batman comes back healed and replaces Azrael and reclaims the title of the Bat. And that's basically the structure used for The Death of Superman or for Spider-Man's Clone Saga. Essentially, each of these storylines is just questioning the validity of their respective characters. And so as I understand it, part of the reason why they wrote this storyline was because number 1, Death of Superman sold incredibly well, but also number 2, the early 90s were when all these edgy characters were popping up. Spawn is perhaps the most popular of these. Created by Todd McFarlane, who had previously penciled Spider-Man and also Batman. He has chains, he has demonic powers, he fights guys with giant guns, and his comics are pretty extreme and over the top. I think the Darkness fits into there as well, who I actually really love. The Max sometimes gets grouped in there, but I don't know if it really belongs because that book is a lot more emotional than all these others. And then if you look at mainstream Marvel and DC comics, basically you had guys like the Punisher and Ghost Rider and Wolverine, and these were the big heroes. And so as I understand it, a lot of people questioned Batman and they were like, why doesn't Batman just kill people? You know, why doesn't he be like the Punisher or Ghost Rider or Wolverine or Spawn? In other words, people were like, doesn't this seem kind of silly? And so that's part of what this storyline is, Knightfall, is it's just Batman being replaced by another guy. And so tonight we're not actually talking about the full Knightfall saga because I haven't read it. I've only read the first third. So tonight we are only talking about the first part of the Knightfall saga, Knightfall. Yes, it's called the same thing as the whole saga. And so as I said, this video is probably going to be a little bit all over the place, but I just wanted to touch on some really cool things, I think, about this comic. As I said, Bane is the main villain of this comic, and this was really the comic wherein he became a major force and a major Batman antagonist. He has kind of a crazy origin story that just is absurd, quite frankly. If I'm remembering it correctly, before he was born, his father and his mother, who was pregnant with him, were both thrown into prison. The father died, and so as a result, whenever the mom gave birth, the baby had to carry out the sentence of the father, who passed away. This is crazy, dude. That's like, why is a baby in prison? Nevertheless, the baby is in prison and it grows up to become Bane. And so Bane hears all these stories from different guys who talk about Gotham and talk about how cool Gotham is and how it's like the gem of the world. And so Bane grows bigger, he grows stronger, he grows smarter, he reads a lot of books, and he basically just kind of wants to rule the world. It's just one of those things where he wants a place that is his and he wants to be number one, he wants to be the king. And so he decides to set his sights on Gotham because he hears all these stories about Batman and how Batman is basically keeping everyone down there. You know, he's keeping down the gang traffic. And so if you took out Batman, then you would be on top of the world, basically. And so Bane goes, okay, I'm gonna take out Batman. And that's all there is to it. There isn't really a deeper motive for why he hates Batman. And so just from the very start, that does kind of feel a little weak to me in terms of character motivation. But on the other hand, I just kind of like it. I kind of like the idea of just having a guy who's like, Batman seems pretty strong. I bet I can take him out. And so Bane escapes the prison, which is on an island, and he's able to make it to Gotham. And the very first thing he does is he steals a bunch of rocket launchers and he blows open Arkham Asylum. And if I'm understanding it correctly, basically Batman had just finished putting all of his supervillains away in Arkham, and then Bane just opens the doors basically and lets everyone free. And Batman's response is not, wow, I gotta take this out, but his response is, who would do this to me? It's kind of a self-centered line, honestly, that he sees all these supervillains get out and he's like, who is attacking me personally? But that is exactly what's happening, though, to be fair. But basically, Bane's plan is to break Batman so he can take over Gotham City, right? And it is genius in its simplicity, right? Because the very first thing he does is blow up Arkham Asylum and let everyone free. And so really, the entire purpose of doing this is he just wants to wear Batman down. That's it. Because I think so often you see this in media where it's like you have the Sinister Six or whatever, and it's like this group of supervillains who come and they work together and they're trying to plot how to take out Spider-Man and how to use all their unique powers individually. But with Bane, it's just like, yeah, I'm gonna let all these psychos loose and it's gonna create a bunch of chaos, and Batman's gonna have to try to fight all this chaos, and he's going to fail because he's gonna get weaker, he's gonna get beaten down, he's gonna get tired, and then I'm gonna go in and strike. And so it is kind of refreshing, actually, to see a villain whose major plan involves other villains, but without interacting with them in any way, shape, or form. Because he knows that, like, the Joker is out there, for instance, but he's like, just do evil stuff, I don't care. And so right from the start, I just love that idea. And so the first half of Knightfall, the first half of this freaking 650-page book that I read, the first half of it is just Batman rounding up dudes who he's already fought. And it sounds kind of boring, and that's one of the major criticisms I've seen of this book, is that section seems repetitive. Because really, each issue follows the same sort of structure, which is that Batman decides to go after an antagonist, and then he fights them, and then he wins. And so there are a bunch of dudes he fights. So he spends an issue fighting like Mr. Zaz, he fights Amygdala, he spends a couple issues fighting Joker and Scarecrow, he spends some time fighting Ventriloquist, he spends time fighting some dude with psychic projection powers, I don't remember his name. Cornelius Stirk. I don't know who that is, but he fights him. Yeah, he fights Poison Ivy and Film Freak. I don't know who that is. Film Freak instantly gets murked, though, by Bane, so that's cool, because I didn't have to learn who he was. And so, as I said, these issues have a really similar structure to one another, because it's just Batman trying to recapture these Arkham inmates who have escaped. But the thing is that as you're reading it, it's obvious that Batman is getting more and more worn down and beaten. And apparently even before this, before the comic even started, he's been sick. And so the first half of this comic is just Batman getting more and more tired and beaten up and stressed out. And he starts slipping, and he has to spend like 2 or 3 issues fighting Firefly, who's a loser. And he knows this, he knows he's screwing up, and he knows that he's pushing himself too hard because he's not sleeping, he's tired, he's not resting, he's not well, and just flat out he's exhausted, but he keeps on pushing himself because he feels like he's responsible for rounding up all these Arkham inmates, because the entire time they've been out, they've been killing people. And he kind of understands that this is Bane's plan, right? It is Bane's plan to wear him down but Batman has no other choice but to pursue these villains. And there's some narration from Batman that I really love that sums up his mindset. All men have limits. They learn what they are and then learn not to exceed them. I ignore mine. And so that's what this comic is it's Batman breaking down. And the reason why this is interesting is because of the fact that a lot of Batman writers seem to believe in the Bat God view of things. I've heard it's called before. Basically, Bat God kind of points to what I think is probably the most typical view of Batman, where it's like, oh yeah, he can do anything. He's amazing. He can beat anyone with enough planning. Yeah, man, if the sun's exploding, then Batman can totally beat it as long as he has prep time. And so you always have these crazy Batman stories wherein he is able to escape from inescapable tasks or torments or whatever. He's always able to come out on top. That's what I'm trying to say. But this comic doesn't really go for that because, again, the entire point of the comic is it's Batman breaking down so that way Bane can come in for the kill. And so right off the bat, that's probably my favorite thing about this comic is just the fact that you are kind of watching in real time as Batman is getting more and more worn down and beaten. And you know that Bane is going to break his back because, again, it's literally on the cover, but that makes the entire experience that much more tense and stressful. And so it creates this really weird sensation where whenever Batman finally does go up against Bane and whenever he finally fights him, and inevitably because of the fact that he is sick and worn down and beaten up already, because of the fact that he loses to Bane, whenever Bane finally breaks Batman's back, there's like a huge relief to it. At least for me, it's almost this moment where it's like, okay, this dude has done everything that he possibly could, and now it's over. And I can't recall ever really having experienced that before in a piece of media, where it's like you just see someone getting beaten down, and then finally they sink down to their lowest, and you know that it can't get any worse. There's a moment that's really crazy immediately following Bane breaking Batman's back, wherein Bane just appears on a rooftop in the middle of Gotham. I don't know how they got there. You see Bane broke Batman's back in the Batcave, and then just all of a sudden they're on a rooftop, and that's cool, I guess. And then Bane just, yells, he's like, I have your hero, I have your savior. And he like chucks him down several roofs and Batman just bounces off with his broken back. And so that's pretty crazy. That was a moment that really stood out to me. But of course, the world needs a Batman because without Batman, who will they write comic books about? And so at this point in the comics, Dick Grayson, Nightwing, and Batman were not on speaking terms. They had a falling out. And so as a result, Batman Bruce Wayne asked John Paul Valley, who's Azrael, to fill in for him. Azrael is kind of a weird dude. He was a normal student who grew up with subconscious brainwashing from a cult, the Order of Saint Dumas. Basically, his dad was an Azrael who was this sort of avenging knight. And then they whispered some sleeper phrases into John Paul Valley's head. John Paul Valley is a freaking weird name. But then they like say these phrases or these codes, and then this unlocks like Matrix powers basically, where it's like, oh, I know all of Kung Fu. My dad showed me these subliminal messages whenever I was young, and so now that you've said the magic word, that unlocks all of this training in my head. And so I read The Sword of Azrael, and I don't really know what happened in between that and Knightfall. But anyways, it just seems like John Paul Valley is living with them. That's really what it seems like. Like you got Batman, you got Robin, who's Tim Drake at this point in time, and you got Alfred. And then you just have a fourth guy, John Paul Valley, who's like living with them, I think. He's just there. And he fights crime in a really stupid looking suit. Until Batman's like, hey, John Paul Valley, you need to take over as Batman because we can't let anyone know that like Batman is screwed up or else crime will be 10 times worse. And so I'm going to recover. I'm in a wheelchair now because my Bane broke my back. And so as a result, John Paul Valley, you are Batman. And Bruce Wayne gives the express instruction to not target Bane. But what do you think John Paul Valley is gonna do? And so right from the start of things, Batman and Robin go out together, and Batman at this point in time, again, John Paul Valley, Azrael. And I just want to point this out before I forget. In his first appearances, he looks like a big nerd, but then anytime you see him drawn in this, he looks like a freaking Chad. So like, what happened? Did they say some kind of sleeper phrase and then that unlocked like a strong jaw? Regardless, John Paul Valley and Robin go out together. And right off the bat, John Paul Valley is way more violent than Batman. And he just beats the crap out of people. And Robin's like, hey, what are you doing? Stop beating the crap out of people. And John Paul Valley is like, no, I'm gonna beat the crap out of people. And Robin's like, no, Batman wouldn't want that. Batman wouldn't beat some guy senseless. And then John Paul Valley is like, yeah, and that's why he had his back broken. And it's really funny because of the fact that whenever Bruce Wayne tells John Paul Valley that he wants him to be Batman while Bruce is healing, basically John Paul Valley has this moment where he's like, are you sure? Do you think I'm good enough? And then Bruce Wayne's like, yeah, you'll do good. And then later on, whenever they're fighting guys, Robin starts trying to give John Paul Valley feedback, and John Paul is like, I don't need to hear this from you. I'm Batman now, don't you understand? And he starts power tripping and going crazy, and he tells a guy that he's gonna cut his ears off, I think. I don't know if I wrote down in my notes where that was, but it's like a mob guy he's talking to. And there's one point wherein he's fighting Scarecrow, and Scarecrow hypnotized a kid and told him to jump off a cliff. And instead of saving the kid, he just tries to capture Scarecrow, and he's fortunate because another vigilante named Anarchy, which is misspelled, is there. And let's talk about that Scarecrow story. Two of the major villains who Batman has to hunt down after Arkham gets blown up are Scarecrow and the Joker, who decide to team up. And you see what they do is actually kind of hilarious, because they go and they kidnap the mayor. And Scarecrow has his fear gas, and he keeps on spraying it in the mayor's face. And basically the mayor just sees snakes, he just sees serpents. And so basically the Joker and Scarecrow just want the mayor to make all these crank calls, and they want him to just like call up people and like tell them the wrong address to go to, or they want him to say that there's a problem where there's not one. Basically they just want him to screw around with the people of Gotham. They're like trying to tear apart Gotham, basically, because they just keep on torturing the mayor and making him do things. And I just find it so funny that they have this guy for like a couple days, and basically the entire time they're just spraying Scarecrow's fart gas into his face. Like anytime he starts to become lucid or talk back to them, Scarecrow's like, okay, fart gas. And it just cracked me up. It just cracked me up every time it happens, because again, it's for like a couple days they have them. I made a video some time ago that was just about why Scarecrow sucks and why he's Batman's worst villain. I still kind of stand by that, but at the same time, there's a Batman story contained within this collection called The God of Fear that I think is quite an interesting look at Scarecrow. Basically, the premise of it is that Scarecrow has hypnotized all these people, all these students, and he had them dress up like him, and he is using them to commit crimes. And Scarecrow is just a big nerd, right? Like he's not strong. He is smart, but he's kind of stupid because he's prideful. He has a thing for collecting priceless books, and so I guess that's a character trait. But really, Scarecrow's major thing, the reason why the storyline is called The God of Fear, is because of the fact that Scarecrow wants Gotham City to recognize him as their God of Fear. And Commissioner Gordon's response is, Scarecrow, we can't make you into a god. And then Scarecrow's like, you have 6 hours. And so it's just really funny, it just cracked me up. But I kind of love that angle, actually. Because as I talked about in my video, Why Scarecrow Sucks, he doesn't do anything, he just sprays people with fart gas. And that's all he really does here, and he hypnotizes them, but that's not... People don't understand how hypnosis works, and so as a result, you just get all these stupid things where it's like, oh, I'm gonna swing my watch in front of your face, and then you're gonna be hypnotized, and then you'll have to be my drone forever, and that's not how it works. He has the college kids put on VR headsets though, and that's how he hypnotizes them. So if this comic had come out 30 years later, then it would be viewed on some kind of commentary on Meta. There'd be some kind of Oculus commentary probably. Like kids always be on their phones and on their VR headsets. But I actually kind of love this angle of the God of Fear for Scarecrow. He's a skinny weakling nerd, and so it just makes sense to me that he would try to portray himself as something bigger. It would make sense to me that he would try to become a God of Fear after a sense. Like he's trying to cover up those insecurities within himself that he's not enough, and so if he can be turned into a god, then maybe finally he will stop feeling insecure. I don't know, that's just an angle that I feel really works well for him. And this story isn't a particularly great Scarecrow story because it's kind of goofy. There are some dorky things in here, and I still don't think that Scarecrow is a great villain, but I do think that if you approached Scarecrow more from this angle, I think that he could actually be a legitimate threat. And that's kind of what I said in that video, my video on Why Scarecrow Sucks, is that I think he has a lot of potential, it's just completely unrealized. And so as I said, John Paul Valley, the acting Batman, was told not to go after Bane. So the first thing he does is try to go after Bane, because John Paul Valley feels like he has this weight on his shoulders where he like needs to be better than Batman. He needs to take out Bane to show that he's better than Batman. There's one fight scene that I find really freaking funny, which is where Azrael, dressed up as Batman, goes after Bane, right, for the first time. Because I think he takes on Bane like twice. And so this first match is John Paul Valley taking on Bane in a hotel. And basically they're fighting, they're several floors up, and they're fighting, and Bane takes John Paul Valley and throws him into the middle of the hotel. He throws him several floors down. John Paul Valley is able to land in a fountain of water, right? So he's able to mitigate a lot of the damage he would have taken just by doing that. And then you just see an elevator come down, and it opens up, and Bane is there. And I started laughing It cracked me up really freaking hard, just the fact that Bane doesn't have like a cool entrance to get to the bottom floor. He just takes the elevator, he just waits. That cracked me up. And then what made me laugh even harder was the fact that he starts running at Batman. He starts running at John Paul Valley, and then he just runs past him. He has the chance to finish things with John Paul Valley by if he just stepped on him, if he just stepped on his head, if he broke his back like he did Bruce Wayne's. He took the elevator down to get to the first floor, and then he just ran past John Paul Valley. And that's all there was to it. And it cracked me up really bad. It made me laugh really hard just because it was like not cool at all. And so I really love that. There are some gems whenever you're reading older comics. And so John Paul Valley builds this crazy looking bat suit that's very, very 90s-esque. It reminds me a lot of the Spider-Man 2099 suit, but I dig it. It's kind of cool. And the way he builds this entire suit is because of the brainwashing that was done to him when he was a child. And he just thinks to himself, I need a suit. And then he starts like automatically drawing, and his mind goes blank, and he just builds these blueprints of a bat suit, because apparently the Order of Saint Dumas put that into his head whenever he was 3. I don't really understand how that works, but it does, I guess. And so he doesn't really have to build the bat suit. He just kind of just comes out like a beam from his head onto the paper. He doesn't have to think about it, because, you know, whatever. And so this volume concludes with a final issue where it's Azrael, the acting Batman, John Paul Valley, taking on Bane. And it's actually a really freaking gripping issue. Long story short, they start fighting on a train, and the train gets completely derailed and crashes, and it goes into a building, and Azrael's just beating the crap out of Bane. Because the entire reason why Batman lost to Bane was because of the fact that he was worn down, and he was sick, and he was tired. But Azrael kind of, he beefed himself up with this crazy suit, and he fully intended to like go after Bane and go after Bane hard to prove that he could maintain control of Gotham. And so it's just a really freaking well done issue. It's a really action-packed issue that I think just works extraordinarily well, because it just shows Azrael being brutal and being violent towards Bane, who deserves it. And so basically this first volume of the 3-part Knightfall storyline ends with Azrael essentially being the dominant Batman. So as I said, I have not read the next 2 parts. I have not read Knight's Quest or Knight's End, but from what I've read, both of these parts kind of go on for too long. And already one issue that I see potentially cropping up is the fact that since Azrael took out Bane, which is the best possible ending you could have for this first act, because of that, there isn't really a clear major antagonist going forward. Because John Paul Valley knows how to be Batman already. He's proven that he can take out Bruce's foes. And so at that point, it's just kind of like, okay, where do we go now? And so all in all, I am looking forward to reading the next part of the saga. I'll probably do a video on it, because if I'm gonna read 700 pages of something, then yeah, it's probably worth my time to do a video on it. This is what I got. Thank you for watching. Have a nice night, and goodbye.
I'm Batman. I am Batman. I'm the Batman. I'm the Batman of Gotham. I am Batman. Batman.
I'm going to bed.